Coming up, the Dallas Stars maintain their spot atop the West, while the Kings finish off the Avs in dramatic fashion. This is Locked On Game to Game NHL.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NHL, local experts going over the biggest stories on the ice. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. We're ready to recap the action for you from Thursday. We'll start out with Tyler Seguin, who scored twice, and the Dallas Stars snapped the Wild's home winning streak in the process. Both Locked On Stars and Wild give us the recap.
The Dallas Stars closed out their quick 2-game road trip with a win over the Minnesota Wild, securing the complete 4 out of 4 points on the trip. Hey everybody, this is Dane Lewis with Locked On Stars, and the Dallas Stars are absolutely rolling right now. They've won their last 2 games, the 2 games back from the Christmas break, both of those wins coming against division opponents, Nashville on Tuesday, and then a more important game on Thursday night, the Minnesota Wild, the teams that finds themselves in the top 3 in the Central. And the Dallas Stars come out and they find a way to absolutely dominate the third period to get a pretty decisive win by a score of 4-1. And the Stars really dominating on all fronts in this game, out shooting the Wild 43-24, winning in the faceoff dot, winning 70% of the draws, going 2 for 3 on the power play as opposed to Minnesota's 0 for 2. I mean, a near perfect night for the team. Jake Ottinger, the Minnesota native, had one of his best games of the season, saving 23 of 24 shots, only allowing one to Kirill Kaprizov, a shot that Kaprizov shoots from the trapezoid off of Jake's back and into the net. A pretty nifty play from Kirill the Thrill, but it's not enough for the Wild as the Stars come into their building and beat them 4-1. And a lot of guys played really well in this game. We're starting to see Tyler Seguin heat up a little bit. He gets his 8th and 9th goal of the season in this one. Jamie Benn gets another goal. Wyatt Johnston has a 2-point night, an assist and a goal to go with it. A guy that is now leading rookie scoring as far as goals. And I mean, Wyatt Johnston, if he's not already, truly needs to be a name that is mentioned amongst the Calder Trophy conversation. He has been nothing short of spectacular for the Stars this season at 19 years old. Well, we'll talk about this game in its entirety on Friday's episode of Locked On Stars. Be sure to check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
At the end of the day, you got to shoot the puck to score. Hey everybody, Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, recapping a 4-1 win for the Dallas Stars over the Minnesota Wild. The Wild's 7-game winning streak at home is history, but Kirill Kaprizov scoring one of the more insane goals you'll see this year. To get the scoring started, the Stars added a couple of power play goals, and in the end, the Wild just were throttled in the faceoff circle. And as a result, had a little bit of a tough time sustaining offensive presence in this one tonight. And as a result, the Stars shot the puck 43 times, and they come away with the win here this evening. For more on the Minnesota Wild, make sure you're following Locked On Wild wherever you listen to your podcasts.
The New York Islanders won their 3rd game in a row by beating the skidding Columbus Blue Jackets. Our Locked On Islanders host has more after the win on Long Island.
The New York Islanders are finding their groove and win their 3rd straight. Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders here. 2-1 win over the Columbus Blue Jackets. Islanders lose the shutout for Ilya Sorokin with 20 seconds left in the game. But overall, this was a solid effort by the New York Islanders. They were smart with the puck, controlled the tempo of the game for most of it, especially in the second and third periods, and never really felt like this game was a threat to get out of hand or for them to fall behind. So overall, J.G. Pageau, solid. Hudson Fasching, solid. Anthony Beauvillier having another good game for the Isles. 3 straight solid efforts for 3 straight wins, and that was very important for this team as they head to a 4-game West Coast road trip starting on Sunday in Seattle. For more, listen to and watch the Locked On Islanders podcast with me, Gil Martin, wherever you get podcasts.
Alex DeBrincat tied the game for the Senators and then won it in overtime. And now Locked On Capitals recaps how Washington let that game slip away.
The Washington Capitals fall in overtime. Hi, this is Dan Homey of Locked On Capitals. Well, your Washington Capitals fell to the Ottawa Senators in overtime by a score of 4-3. It was a goal by DeBrincat that ended the game. It was a game that was tilted in Ottawa's favor, but then in the second period, the Capitals came to life. The Caps got goals by Kuznetsov, Ovechkin, his 23rd of the season, and Strome. It was a game that saw Marcus Johansson leave the game with an unknown injury. Darcy Kemper saved 41 of 45. The Caps hope to get back into the win column Saturday as they take on the Montreal Canadiens. Keep it locked to Locked On Capitals, and I will keep you updated on all the news with your Washington Capitals. Locked On Capitals, your team every day.
Coming up, an offensive explosion for the Florida Panthers. This is Locked On Game to Game NHL. It can happen so easily. You are out with your friends or coworkers, you're putting back a few drinks, but a few becomes a few too many. It's time to go, and for a moment, you think about calling a ride, but you're a good driver, you live nearby, you think you can make it home okay. What are the odds that you'll get pulled over? Or even so, what's the worst that could possibly happen? You lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Play it simple and plan ahead and get a ride. Drive sober or get pulled over. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NHL. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Panthers scored 7 goals in Florida against the Canadiens last night. Locked On Panthers goes over a big win for the reigning President's Trophy winners.
The Florida Panthers in their first game back from their holiday break get their pieces back and have an offensive explosion. What is up, guys? I'm Ron Velez from the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, and the Florida Panthers defeat the Montreal Canadiens by a final score of 7-2 in Sunrise, Florida. And with Aleksander Barkov being back after missing the last 3 games due to a lower body injury, Radko Gudas, after suffering a concussion a few weeks ago on the Western Canadian trip, and Aaron Ekblad after getting an injury last Friday right before the holiday break, all 3 of them returned to the lineup. So this was a mostly healthy Florida Panthers lineup, and Aleksander Barkov got a hat trick in the first 15 minutes of the game, the fastest in franchise history. He got 5 points on the night. Matthew Tkachuk led the way with 9 shots for the Cats and got 4 points on the night, 2 goals, 2 assists. Eetu Luostarinen ties his career high in goals with 9. And the Florida Panthers really protected Sergei Bobrovsky really well, where they went 14 minutes and 54 seconds between the second and the third period without allowing a shot on goal by the Montreal Canadiens in this game. So overall, a great performance. And the power play for the Panthers, they went 3 for 6 tonight after going 2 for 25 in the last game. This was a power play that was struggling, and they got it going tonight. So as Matthew Tkachuk said, every game from here on out is a playoff game for the Panthers, and they're off to a right start in what's considered the second half of the season. So listen to my recap of the 7-2 win for the Florida Panthers over the Montreal Canadiens. Make sure to listen to my next episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Your team every day.
The Red Wings' cold streak continued with a 6-3 loss in Buffalo to the Sabres. Our Locked On host with the Red Wings recaps Detroit's 7th loss in their last 9 games.
The Red Wings tried their darndest to replicate last night against the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight against the Buffalo Sabres, but ultimately fell 6-3 after scoring 3 straight goals in the third period to bring it close, but to no avail, and they end up losing this one, snapping their short 2-game winning streak. Scotty, what led to this loss for the Detroit Red Wings?
I mean, a reoccurring theme throughout the season is 2 bad periods and a good period. And this was certainly no different than that reoccurring theme that we've become, unfortunately, accustomed to. Yeah, the first 2 periods in this game were absolutely brutal. It was a pretty rough defensive game that not necessarily that they gave up, a million shots, but the shots that they did give up were really high danger, just bad defense all around. And then, scraped it together and had a really good third, but, five in the hole there. So,
yeah, it was definitely not a great game. So we'll break down this entire game on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Red Wings.
The LA Kings overcame 4 goals from the Avs in the second period to come back and beat the Avs in a shootout. Both of our Locked On hosts recap the dramatic finish in Colorado.
The LA Kings show heart and determination in a come-from-behind win over the defending champs. Hi, I'm Eddie Garcia with the Locked On LA Kings podcast. The Kings were in Colorado to take on the Stanley Cup champion Avalanche. In the first period, Gabe Vilardi would score for LA, his team leading 16th of the season, and the Kings had a 1-0 lead after one. Second period, a different story. The two teams would exchange power play goals, including Philippe Deneau's 11th of the season, but led by defenseman Cale Makar, Colorado would score 3 straight goals and have a 4-2 lead going into the third. But in the third, the Kings would rally. 2 goals, one from Alex Iafallo, one from defenseman Sean Walker, and the game was tied at 4-4 going to overtime. A scoreless OT to the shootout. Victor Arvidsson and Adrian Kempe score, and the Kings pull off a 5-4 come-from-behind win. LA goalie Phoenix Copley, who stopped both shooters in the shootout, wins his 6th straight and improved to 8-1 as a King as he turned aside 23 shots. Kings improved to 21-12-6 on the season. They're 6-0-1 in their last 7, and they're just 2 points behind Vegas for first in the Pacific Division. We'll have a full recap of the win over the Avalanche on Friday's show. For more, check out Locked On LA Kings wherever you get your podcasts, your team every day.
All right, so the Colorado Avalanche had this one in their hand, a 2-goal lead going into the third against the Los Angeles Kings. They let it slip away, but it did go to overtime, so at least they get a point, and they had an opportunity to win this thing on a Cale Makar 2-on-1 breakaway. Puck just kind of jumped on him, but he couldn't put it home. Goes to a shootout where the Kings get the extra point, and this one's frustrating because, like I said, you had it in your hand. I'm not going to say you had it wrapped up because the Kings are a very good team, but you had this game in your hand, 2-goal lead going into the third at home, and you let it slip away.
A 2-point night from Mikko Rantanen, a 2-point night from Cale Makar, additions from JT Compher, Evan Rodriguez. And it's still not enough. You can't win one period and expect to win the game. This is not the same team from last year, injury depleted and all. The Kings brought their best, and they walked away with the extra point.
They did. Cale looked phenomenal tonight, so it's sad to see his performance end with a loss. So the Avs have one more game in the year of 2022, and that is against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And that's obviously a good team, and the Avs are going to have their hands full. They need 2 points. They're on a little bit of a losing streak right now. They got to get one in the win column.
Tony DeAngelo scored the game winner in overtime for the Philadelphia Flyers to cap off the late rally in San Jose. Locked On Sharks and Locked On Flyers go over all of the details with us.
The Sharks blow a 3-1 lead as the Flyers win 4-3 in overtime. I'm JD Young of Locked On Sharks, and 2-point night from Erik Karlsson, 2 goals from Tomas Hertl wasn't enough for the Sharks as they let in 2 goals in the third period, and then Tony DeAngelo capped it off in overtime. Erik Karlsson scored his 50th point of the season, so 50 points in 37 games, the third fastest since the 1975-1976 season by a defenseman, continuing his Norris campaign, but the Sharks continue to collapse in games as they have in the third period. And finally, the Flyers finish them off in overtime. So we'll talk about what Erik Karlsson is doing and how you should just give him the Norris right now. Tomas Hertl's big night and more on your next episode of Locked On Sharks, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well.
It took until the wee hours of the morning, but the Flyers have finally won an overtime game this season, thanks to Tony DeAngelo. Hi, this is Rachel Donner from the Locked On Flyers podcast with your quick reaction to the Flyers' 4-3 win over the San Jose Sharks. This game honestly was a little chaotic. There was sloppy play on both sides, lots of turnovers, lost pucks, errant passes. You do really have to give the Flyers credit for working their way back from being down 3-1. Travis Konechny with his 4th multi-point game in a row, including the game-tying goal in this one. Sam Ersson picks up his first NHL win as well. For more on this game and the Flyers all season long, tune into the Locked On Flyers podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NHL. Thank you again for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure, of course, that you are subscribed to Locked On NHL and your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.